I'm Amanda, 23 years old, and until last month, I thought I understood what family was. That perception shifted when my mother glared at me over our kitchen table and snarled, "Get out and don't come back." The shock left me frozen for a moment, before I grabbed my keys and walked out, unaware that my life was about to completely unravel. 3 weeks later, my father called, asking why the bank had frozen their mortgage. Before I share how my mother kicked me out over money I hadn't even known about, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had family turn on you unexpectedly. Just 8 weeks before everything collapsed, I walked across the stage at my college graduation, diploma in hand, feeling like the world was full of possibilities. My business degree took hard work, with 4 years of late nights, part-time jobs, and more instant ramen than I care to remember. My father, Gregory, beamed from the audience, whistling loudly enough to make our row laugh, while my mother, Pamela, sat beside him, smiling politely, but frequently checking her watch during the ceremony. That pretty much summed up my relationship with my parents. Dad was my biggest cheerleader, always ready with a dad joke or shoulder to cry on, while Mom was more complicated. Growing up, she was the disciplinarian, pushing me to get perfect grades and join the right extracurriculars. Nothing was ever quite good enough for her. When I made the honor roll, she'd question why I wasn't valedictorian, and when I placed second in a debate competition, she wondered why I couldn't have been first. Still, I thought we had a decent relationship. Not warm and fuzzy, but functional. After graduation, moving back home temporarily seemed like the smart choice. The job market was tough, and I figured I could save money for 6 months before getting my own place. Dad was thrilled, telling me to stay as long as I needed. "The house feels empty without you, kiddo," he'd said while helping me carry boxes to my childhood bedroom, still decorated with lavender walls I'd chosen at 14. I tried to be a good house guest, waking up early each morning to make coffee for everyone before Dad left for his job at the insurance office. I cleaned up after myself, did extra chores around the house, and cooked dinner at least 3 nights a week, hoping to ease some of Mom's stress after she came home from her administrative job at the local hospital. 2 weeks after moving back home, I landed a job interview at Wilson Financial, a respected firm in our town. The interview went surprisingly well, and they offered me a position on the spot. The salary exceeded my expectations for an entry-level role, and they even offered partial tuition reimbursement if I wanted to pursue an MBA down the road. The catch was they needed me to start in 3 weeks instead of immediately, as they were finishing up a system transition. That evening, I brought home a cake to celebrate the good news. Dad popped open a bottle of champagne he'd been saving, and for once, even Mom seemed genuinely happy for me. She asked questions about the benefits package and appeared impressed by my answers. "Well, it seems like all those tuition payments finally paid off," she said, which was practically a standing ovation from her. We had a family dinner that felt like old times before the tension that had crept into our household. Dad shared stories about his first job out of college, and Mom even laughed at his jokes. I felt hopeful that maybe this new chapter would help improve our relationships. During those 3 weeks before my job was set to start, I tried to be useful around the house. When Dad mentioned having trouble with their online banking, I spent an afternoon showing him and Mom how to set everything up properly. They weren't particularly tech-savvy, and I patiently guided them through creating secure passwords and navigating the bank's website. "This is why we had kids," Dad joked, referring to my built-in tech support. Mom watched closely as I explained how to check their accounts and pay bills online, asking numerous questions about security and expressing concerns about identity theft. I assured her that as long as they used strong passwords and kept their information private, they'd be fine. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs. Mom had been acting increasingly tense over the preceding 2 weeks, taking phone calls in hushed tones and quickly hanging up if I walked into the room. Mail would disappear from the counter before I could see who it was addressed to, but I chalked it up to her typical work stress, perhaps compounded by having an adult daughter back in the house. The weekend before everything fell apart, we all went to my Aunt Susan's house for a family barbecue. Dad's sister had always been kind to me and made a big fuss over my new job. Mom was unusually quiet during the gathering, and on the drive home, she and Dad had a whispered argument I couldn't quite hear from the back seat. When I asked if everything was okay, Dad forced a smile and said it was just boring adult stuff. I wish I had pushed harder. I wish I had sensed what was coming. But I had no idea that in just a few days, my mother would be screaming at me to get out of her house, turning my entire world upside down. The morning everything began to unravel started like any other. I woke up early, made coffee, and was scrolling through my phone at the kitchen table when Mom came downstairs. She didn't say good morning, which wasn't unusual, but what happened next definitely was. I went upstairs to shower and get dressed, and when I returned to my room, I found Mom going through a stack of my mail left on my desk. She had my bank statement open in her hands. "What are you doing?" I asked, stunned to find her rifling through my personal documents. She didn't even look embarrassed. "This is my house, Amanda. I can look at whatever I want. That's my personal mail. You can't just go through my things." She folded the statement and placed it back on the desk with deliberate slowness. "When you pay the mortgage, you can have privacy." I stood there, mouth agape, as she brushed past me and left the room. This wasn't like her. My mother could be cold and demanding, but she had always respected basic boundaries. Something was very wrong. Later that morning, while applying for an apartment I found online, I overheard my parents arguing in their bedroom. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried down the hallway. "She's going to find out eventually, Pamela," Dad said, his voice tight with stress. "She doesn't need to know anything. It's handled." "How is it handled? The calls are coming to the house now." "Lower your voice," Mom hissed. "This is not her problem." "Of course, it's her problem. You made it her problem when you decided to." Their voices dropped too low for me to hear the rest, but one phrase came through clearly in Mom's sharp tone. "She owes us. I owed them for..." What? Sure, they had helped with some of my college expenses, but I'd taken out substantial student loans as well. I had never understood their support as coming with hidden strings attached. When Dad came downstairs later, I tried to ask him what was going on. "Is everything okay with you and Mom? I heard you arguing." He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "It's nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Just some bills piling up." "If you need help with bills, I can contribute now that I have a job lined up." No, he said quickly. "That's not necessary. Your mom is just stressed about work." But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't being truthful. For the first time, I felt a flicker of unease about my father too. He had always been my ally, the parent I could count on. Now, he seemed to be hiding something. That afternoon, I checked all my bank accounts and credit card statements online. Everything looked normal. My credit score was still excellent, something I had worked hard to build throughout college by making every payment on time and keeping my debt-to-income ratio low. Whatever financial problems my parents were facing, they didn't seem to involve Ma directly. Still, the tension in the house was unmistakable. Mom barely spoke to me all day, and Dad seemed to be walking on eggshells around both of us. I decided to make my mom's favorite dinner, lasagna from scratch, as a piece. Offering. I spent the afternoon grating cheese, layering noodles, and simmering sauce, hoping a nice meal might ease whatever was bothering her. When she came home from work, she barely acknowledged my effort, eating in near silence and responding to Dad's attempts at conversation with one-word answers. When I asked about her day, she simply said, "Fine," and continued eating. Dad tried to compensate for her coldness by being extra cheerful, asking about my weekend plans, and telling a long story about a client at work. But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and I caught him glancing nervously at Mom several times. After dinner, I cleaned up the kitchen alone while my parents retreated to the living room. Through the doorway, I could see them having another hushed conversation. Mom looked angry, gesturing sharply with her hands, while Dad appeared to be pleading with her about something. I went to bed early that night, unable to shake the feeling that something bad was looming. As I lay awake staring at my ceiling, I heard my mother's voice from downstairs, clear and cold. "She needs to deal with the consequences." I didn't know what consequences she meant, but I would find out soon enough. The next evening was when everything exploded. I had spent the day filling out paperwork for my new job and avoiding my mother as much as possible. Dad had texted to say he'd be working late, which wasn't unusual, but it meant dinner would be just Mom and me. I decided to bring up the elephant in the room directly as we sat at the kitchen table with plates of leftover lasagna. I took a deep breath and said, "Mom, I know something's wrong. If the family is having money problems, I want to help. My job starts next week, and I can contribute to bills until things get better." She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mix of contempt and something that looked almost like fear. "Now you want to help?" she said, her voice brittle. "How convenient." "What do you mean?" "I've always been willing to help. Stop playing innocent, Amanda. It doesn't suit you." I put down my fork, completely confused. "I honestly don't know what you're talking about." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Let me refresh your memory. Platinum rewards card, $500 credit limit, opened 18 months ago. Ring any bells?" "I don't have a platinum rewards card," I said slowly, a cold feeling spreading through my stomach. "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice rising. "The account is in your name." "Mom, I swear I don't know anything about that card. If there's an account in my name, I didn't open it." For a moment, she stared at me, and then something in her expression shifted. Not to understanding or remorse, but to a kind of calculated coldness. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it. Your father and I opened the card. We needed it for some expenses, and our credit wasn't good enough to qualify." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You used my name, my social security number, without asking me." "Don't be so dramatic. Families help each other. We put you through college, and we needed some help in return." "That's identity theft," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flashed. "It's family, but of course you wouldn't understand. Loyalty, would you?" "Loyalty? You stole my identity. How much did you charge on this card I didn't even know about?" She waved her hand dismissively. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that the payments are late, and now they're calling here asking for you." The room seemed to tilt around me as the implications sank in. "Late payments? So you've been damaging my credit? The credit I worked so hard to build?" "Oh, poor baby and her precious credit score," Mom sneered. "Try raising a child and keeping a household running. Try dealing with real problems." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "This is a real problem. What you did is illegal. You committed fraud using my information." "We're your parents," she shouted, slamming her hand on the table hard enough to make the plates jump. "Everything you have is because of us. Your education, your fancy new job, all of it." "That doesn't give you the right to steal my identity. How am I supposed to trust you after this?" "Trust?" She laughed again, that same hollow sound. "Trust is a luxury your father and I did what we had to do. Dad knows about this?" The betrayal deepened, spreading through me like poison. "Of course he knows. It was his idea to use your information." I couldn't believe it. My father, who had always been my rock, had betrayed me in one of the worst ways possible. "How many other accounts have you opened in my name?" Mom's expression turned calculating. Just the one card, but something in her eyes told me she was lying. "What else, Mom? What else have you done?" "Nothing that concerns you?" "It absolutely concerns me. If you're using my name and social security number, my whole financial future is at stake." "Your future?" she spat. "What about our future? What about the house you've been living in rent-free? What about all the sacrifices we've made for you?" "I've never asked you to sacrifice anything. I offered to pay rent when I moved back in. You and Dad said no because you needed something else from me, something more valuable than my pocket change." The cold feeling in my stomach intensified. My credit, my identity. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with something like satisfaction, as if she was glad I finally understood. "We should work together to fix this," I said, trying to be reasonable despite my growing anger and fear. "We need to pay off whatever balance is on that card, close the account, and you need to tell me about any other accounts you've opened in my name." "There's nothing to fix," she said flatly. "The situation is what it is. The situation is fraud," I was shouting now, all pretense of calm gone. "You could go to jail for this." "Are you threatening me?" Her voice dropped dangerously low. "I'm trying to make you understand how serious this is. My whole financial future could be ruined." "Your future?" she scoffed. "Always about you, so selfish. Just like you've always been. The perfect little princess who thinks the world revolves around her." Her words stung, not because they were true, but because they revealed how little she thought of me, how little she knew me. "I've never been selfish," I said quietly. "I've always tried to make you proud, to be good enough for you. If you Want to make us proud? You'll handle this situation like an adult. Pay the card off and stop complaining. I didn't create this situation. You did, and now you expect me to clean up your mess. Our mess. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You ungrateful little brat, after everything we've done for you. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What kind of parent steals from their own child? That's when she said it, the words that would change everything. Get out, she hissed. Get out and don't bother coming back. What? I stared at my mother, certain I had misheard her. You heard me? Her face was twisted with anger. I barely recognized her. Get out of my house now. Mom, you can't be serious. I looked around, wildly, as if searching for someone to confirm this was just a bad dream. Where's Dad? I need to talk to Dad. Your father isn't here to save you this time, and he agrees with me. I couldn't believe that Dad would never throw me out. I'm going to call him. Go ahead. She folded her arms across her chest. He won't pick up. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number with shaking fingers. It rang and rang before going to voicemail. I tried again, with the same result. See? Mom's voice was cold with triumph. He knows better than to interfere. I looked at her. This woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and was now throwing me out over a credit card she had fraudulently opened in my name. Something fundamental had broken between us, something that could never be repaired. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. I'll go back. You have 30 minutes, she called after me as I walked upstairs. In my childhood bedroom, I stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what was happening. The lavender. Walls I'd once found so comforting now seemed to be closing in on me. Photos of happier times mocked me from their frames. The family vacation to Florida when I was 12, my high school graduation with both parents proudly flanking me, Christmas. Morning just last year with all of us in matching pajamas. How had we gone from that to this? I grabbed my largest backpack and began stuffing it with essentials. Underwear, socks, a few changes of clothes. My mind was racing, trying to figure out where I would go. I had some savings, but not enough for a security deposit and first month's rent. My new job wouldn't start for another week, and I wouldn't get paid for at least 2 weeks after that. As I packed, memories flooded through me. This room had been my sanctuary throughout my childhood. The window seat where I'd read hundreds of books, the desk where I'd studied for the SATs, the closet where I'd hidden when I wanted to, escape my mother's criticism. And now I was being forced to leave it all behind. I grabbed my laptop, chargers, and toiletries. What else would I need? I had no idea how long I would be gone, or if I would ever come back. The thought made me pause, clutching a pair of jeans in my hands. This might be the last time I ever saw this room. I opened my dresser drawer to grab more clothes and noticed something odd. The folder where I kept my important documents was missing. My birth certificate, social security card, passport, all gone. With growing dread, I searched every drawer, looked under the bed, checked the closet. Nothing. I stormed downstairs, finding my mother in the living room, calmly watching television as if she hadn't just shattered our family. "Where are my documents?" I demanded. She didn't even look at me. "What documents? My birth certificate, social security card, passport, they're gone from my room." "Those are our documents," she said. "We're keeping them safe. They're mine." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I need them for my job, for an apartment. You should have thought of that before you turned on your family." I stood there speechless with rage and disbelief. She was punishing me for discovering her fraud by withholding my identity documents. "Give them to me," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Now." "Or what?" She finally looked at me, her expression almost amused. "You'll call the police? Tell them your mother is keeping your documents? They'll laugh you out the door." She was probably right, but I couldn't leave without trying. I marched past her toward their bedroom, determined to find my papers. "Don't you dare go in there," she shouted, following me. I ignored her, yanking open their dresser drawers, searching through the papers on their desk. "Nothing." She grabbed my backpack, which I'd set down during my search. "Time's up. Get out." "Not without my documents." "They're not here," she said, tossing my backpack at me. "And you're not welcome here anymore." I lunged for my backpack, but she held onto one strap. We struggled for a moment, and then the bag tipped, spilling its contents across the floor. My clothes, toiletries, and laptop tumbled out. My mother let go of the empty bag, watching with cold satisfaction as I scrambled to gather my belongings. "How can you do this?" I asked, looking up at her from the floor, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "I'm your daughter." For just an instant, something flickered in her eyes, a hint of the mother I thought I knew, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Not anymore," she said. "You made your choice." I stuffed everything back into my bag with trembling hands. There was nothing else to say, no way to reach her. Whatever had broken inside her had broken us too. I walked out the front door without looking back. The weight of my backpack was nothing compared to the heaviness in my heart. My car sat in the driveway, a 5-year-old Honda Civic I had bought, with my own money during sophomore year. At least she couldn't take that from me. I threw my backpack onto the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, trying to figure out what to do next. Where could I go? Who could I trust? Night was falling as I drove aimlessly through town, past the high school where I'd been valedictorian, past the park where Dad had taught me to ride a bike, past the ice cream shop where we used to go for family treats on summer evenings. Eventually, I parked in the lot of a 24-hour grocery store, too numb to make any decisions. I reclined my seat as far as it would go and stared at the ceiling of my car, replaying the evening's events over and over, looking for something I could have said or done differently. But the truth was, this wasn't my fault. My parents had committed fraud using my identity, and instead of apologizing and making it right, they had thrown me out when I discovered their betrayal. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through my windshield, and the harsh reality that I was essentially homeless. My back ached from sleeping in the car, and my mouth felt dry and sour as I sat up and tried to stretch in the confined space. The full weight of my situation hit me. Not only was I without a home, but my credit was damaged, my identity had been compromised, and my own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had been the ones to hurt me. In that moment, sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, I made a decision. I would not be a victim. I would take control of this situation and fight back. My parents had underestimated me, thinking I would either give in to their demands or crumble under pressure. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. My first call that morning was to my friend Stephanie. We'd been roommates in college for 3 years before she moved in with her boyfriend, Tyler. We had stayed close after graduation, texting regularly, and meeting for coffee when our schedules aligned. "Steph," I said when she answered, my voice cracking slightly. "I need help." To her eternal credit, she didn't hesitate. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I gave her the condensed version. My parents had committed identity theft using my information, and when I confronted them, my mother had thrown me out. "Oh my God, Amanda," she gasped. "That's terrible. Where are you now?" "Sleeping in my car," I admitted. I didn't know where else to go. "Come here," she said immediately. "You can stay with us as long as you need to." Relief washed over me. "Are you sure? What? About Tyler?" "Tyler adores you, and he'll be furious when he hears what happened. Get over here now. I'll make coffee and breakfast." 20 minutes later, I was sitting at Stephanie's kitchen table with a mug of hot coffee warming my hands. As I told her the full story, Tyler joined us halfway through, his expression growing darker as he listened. "That's not just wrong," he said when I finished. "It's illegal. You need to report this." The thought made my stomach clench. Report my own parents? I don't know if I can do that. Stephanie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know it feels awful, but they committed fraud, Amanda. They stole your identity. If you don't report it, you could be held responsible for whatever debt they've racked up in your name." "And who knows how many accounts they've actually opened," Tyler added. "You said your mom claimed it was just one credit card, but she was already lying to you about everything else." They were right, and I knew it. But the idea of potentially sending my own parents to jail made me physically ill. "Let's take this one step at a time," Stephanie suggested, seeing my distress. "First, let's find out exactly what's going on with your credit." We spent the morning visiting the 3 major credit bureaus online. What we found confirmed my worst fears. In addition to the platinum rewards card my mother had mentioned, there was a personal loan for $15 and a store credit card with a $2,000 balance, all opened within the last 2 years, all in my name, all with recent late payments. "This is worse than I thought," I whispered, staring at the screen in horror. "You need to place a fraud alert on your credit right away," Tyler said. He worked in banking and knew the procedures. "And you need to file a police report?" I nodded numbly, still trying to process the extent of the betrayal. My parents hadn't just opened one unauthorized account. They had been systematically using my identity for years. With Stephanie and Tyler's support, I placed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus. Then came the hardest part, filing a police report for identity theft that would implicate my own parents. The officer who took my report was kind but matter-of-fact. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing more often than you'd think," he told me. Family members are actually the most common perpetrators of identity theft because they have easy access to your personal information. "What will happen to my parents?" I asked, my voice small. "That depends on whether you want to press charges. Some victims just want the fraudulent debts removed from their credit and don't pursue criminal charges against family members." I didn't know what I wanted yet. Part of me was still in shock, unable to believe my parents could do this to me. Another part was furious and wanted them to face consequences for their actions. "You don't have to decide right now," the officer assured me. "The important thing is that you filed the report, which you'll need to dispute the fraudulent accounts." Armed with the police report number, my next stop was the bank that had issued the platinum rewards card. I met with a fraud specialist named Melissa, who reviewed my documentation with a sympathetic expression. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said. "Identity theft is traumatic enough without it being committed by people you trust." "Will I be able to get the fraudulent charges removed from my credit history?" I asked. "Yes, but it's a process. We'll need to investigate, and you'll need to fill out an identity theft affidavit for each account." As Melissa walked me through the procedures, she noticed something concerning. "There's another inquiry here from 3 months ago. A mortgage lender." "A mortgage?" I felt dizzy. "I haven't applied for a mortgage." She frowned. "It looks like someone did, using your information. It was approved, too." "My parents refinanced their mortgage 3 months ago," I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "They said it was to get a better interest rate." "Using your identity," Melissa confirmed grimly. "That's a much bigger fraud than just a credit card. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." I left the bank with a stack of forms to fill out and a recommendation for Jessica Barrett, an attorney who specialized in identity theft cases. I called her office from the parking lot and was surprised when they offered me an appointment the same day. Jessica was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who listened intently as I explained my situation. "Your parents have put you in an impossible position," she said when I finished. "But legally, the path forward is clear. This is fraud, plain and simple." "Even the mortgage?" I asked. "Especially the mortgage. That's bank fraud, which is a federal offense." The severity of what my parents had done was finally sinking in. "Will they go to prison?" Jessica's expression softened slightly. "That depends on many factors, including whether this is their first offense and how cooperative they are. But yes, it's possible." I must have looked as devastated as I felt because she added, "I understand this is your family, Amanda. These cases are always difficult, but think about what they've done to you. They've damaged your credit, stolen your identity, and when confronted, they threw you out of their house. They were counting on my familial loyalty to protect them from consequences." She was right. My parents, especially my mother, had been manipulating me, banking on the fact that I wouldn't turn them in. As I left Jessica's office with a plan to file formal complaints with all the financial institutions involved, my phone rang. It was my father. "Amanda," his voice was strained. "Where are you?" "Your mother said you left?" "Left?" I repeated incredulously. "She threw me out, Dad. She told me to get out and not come back. She was upset. You know how she gets. Come home, and we can work this out." "Work out what?" "The fact that you and Mom have been committing fraud using my identity for years." There was a long pause. "It's not what you think." Really? Because I've spent all day talking to credit. Bureaus, the police, and a lawyer, and they all say it's exactly what I think. Identity theft and fraud. You went to the police? His voice rose in panic. Amanda, what have you done? What have I done? What have you done, Dad? How could you do this to me? You need to drop this right now, he said, his tone hardening. You're making a big mistake. The mistake was trusting you and Mom. We're your parents. We gave you everything, and now you've taken everything. My home, my credit, my future. Don't be so dramatic. It's just money. Family is more important. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. If family was so important, you wouldn't have stolen from me. Amanda, please. His voice softened, turning pleading. Your mother is beside herself. She didn't mean what she said. Come home, and we'll fix this together. For a moment, I wavered. This was my dad, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and checked under my bed for monsters, the parent I had always thought I could trust. But then I remembered the empty folder where my documents should have been, the way my mother had. Watched me scramble to gather my belongings from the floor, the cold finality in her voice when she'd said, Not anymore. I can't come home, I said firmly, and I won't drop the fraud reports. What you and Mom did was wrong, and there have to be consequences. You'll regret this, he warned, his tone changing again. When this is all over and your mother and I are ruined, I hope you'll be satisfied. The call ended, and I sat in my car shaking. My own father had just threatened me for reporting a crime he had committed against me. The world had turned upside down, but despite the fear and sadness, I felt something else was growing inside me. Resolve. I wouldn't back down. I wouldn't let them manipulate me anymore. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself against my parents, and it felt terrifying and empowering all at once. 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, phone, calls, and adjusting to my new reality. Stephanie and Tyler had converted their home office into a bedroom for me, refusing any rent until I got on my feet. Just buy groceries sometimes, Tyler had said, and keep making that amazing lasagna. I had started my job at Wilson Financial, throwing myself into the work as a distraction from the chaos of my personal life. My coworkers were friendly and professional, and none of them knew the turmoil I was experiencing. I was grateful for the normalcy of the office, the predictable rhythm of meetings and deadlines. The fraud investigations were ongoing, but I had filed all the necessary paperwork and provided statements to the bank's security department. I had just returned home from work one evening when my phone rang. It was my father again. We hadn't spoken since that call 3 weeks earlier, though he had left several voicemails alternating between pleading and thinly veiled threats. Something made me answer this time. Hello? What did you do? He demanded, his voice ragged with stress. What are you talking about? The bank froze the mortgage. They're saying it's fraud, and they're launching an investigation. We could lose the house, Amanda. A complex mix of emotions washed over me. Vindication, guilt, sadness. I didn't do anything, Dad. You and Mom did this when you used my identity to refinance your mortgage without my knowledge or consent. We were desperate, he shouted. The house was underwater after the market crash, and we couldn't qualify for a refinance on our own. Your credit was our only option. You should have talked to me, asked for my help. Instead, you committed fraud and then threw me out when I discovered it. Your mother threw you out, not me, he said, his voice dropping. I would never have done that. But you didn't stop her, I pointed out. You didn't pick up when I called. You didn't stand up for me. There was a long silence. I couldn't, he finally said. Things are complicated. Explain it to me then. Make me understand how my own parents could do this to me. He sighed heavily. It started small, just one credit card, when the hot water heater broke, and we didn't have the money to replace it. Your mother suggested using your information, since our credit was shot after my medical bills a few years back. I remembered my father's hospitalization for pneumonia when I was in college, how worried we had all been, but I hadn't known about any financial problems stemming from it. We planned to pay it off before you ever knew about it, he continued, but then other things came up, the roof, the car transmission. Before we knew it, we were in over our heads and the mortgage. I prompted the bank. They were threatening foreclosure. We were 3 months behind on payments. Using your identity for the refinance was your mother's idea. But you went along with it. Yes, he admitted. I went along with it. I was weak and scared of losing our home. I closed my eyes, trying to process this new information. Why didn't you just tell me? I would have helped if I could. Your mother wouldn't hear of it, she said. We shouldn't burden you with our problems. He paused. And if I'm being honest, I was ashamed. What kind of father can't provide for his family without stealing from his daughter? The raw pain in his voice made my throat tight. Despite everything, I still loved my father. He had made terrible choices, but at least he seemed to recognize that now. The bank investigator came to the house today, he continued. He said all our accounts are frozen pending the fraud investigation. We can't access any of our money, Amanda. And your mother, she's not handling it well. What do you mean? He lowered his voice. There's something I never told you. Your mother has had a gambling problem for years. Online poker mostly. That's where a lot of the money went. The revelation stunned me. My strict, controlling mother, a gambling addict. It seemed impossible, but it would explain so much. The secrecy, the financial problems, the desperate measures. The stress of the investigation had made it worse, Dad continued. She's barely sleeping, barely eating, just glued to her phone, trying to win enough to fix this mess. She needs help, Dad. Professional help. I know, he said quietly. I've known for a long time, but whenever I bring it up, she shuts down completely. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Pity for my mother's addiction, anger at my father's enabling, frustration that they had dragged me into their dysfunction. I'm sorry about the mortgage and the accounts being frozen, I said finally. But I couldn't let the fraud continue. My entire financial future is at stake. I understand, he said, surprising me. You did what you had to do. What we did was wrong, and now we're facing the consequences. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope that my relationship with my father might eventually heal. He wasn't making excuses anymore. He was accepting responsibility. What will you do now? I asked. Try to negotiate with the bank, sell the house if we have to, get your mother some help. He sounded tired but resolved. And try to make things right with you, if you'll let me. I don't know if things can ever be right again, I said honestly, but I'm willing to talk. That's all I can ask for, he replied. I love you, Amanda. I never stopped, not for a moment. After we hung up, I sat on my temporary bed in Stephanie and Tyler's converted office, processing everything I'd learned. My mother's gambling addiction cast her actions in a different light, not excusing them, but at least explaining some of her desperation and irrationality. That evening, I told Stephanie and Tyler about my conversation with my father. A gambling addiction? Stephanie said, shaking her head. That actually makes sense. Remember how your mom always had those headaches during family events and would disappear for hours with her phone? I hadn't made that connection, but now that Stephanie mentioned it, it was a clear pattern. My mother had